My name is Emily, and I'm 32. I was sitting in my tiny apartment flipping through my wedding planner, heart racing with joy. Nathan and I had picked the perfect venue, a little garden where sunlight danced through the trees. Every detail felt like a promise of our future. But there was something my sister Hannah didn't know, a secret I'd kept for years. I'd been quietly holding our family together, paying for her dreams. Have you ever felt your happiest moment slip through your fingers? Tell me where you're watching from, and if this resonates, please like and subscribe for the rest of my story. I pushed open the door to the coffee shop, the bell jingling above me. The smell of roasted beans hit me, and I spotted Hannah at a corner table, her head bent over her phone. I was still buzzing from wedding planning, my binder stuffed with fabric swatches and catering menus. Today I wanted to ask her to be a bridesmaid, to share this milestone with the sister I'd always looked out for. I slid into the seat across from her, smiling. "Hey, you ready to talk dresses?" She glanced up, her eyes flickering with something I couldn't place. "Sure, Emily," she said, but her voice was flat, like she was reading a script. Her fingers kept tapping her phone, and I noticed her nails freshly manicured, probably paid for with the allowance I sent her each month. I brushed off the thought, focusing on the moment. I was thinking blush pink for the bridesmaids. I started flipping open my binder. "It'll look amazing with the garden setting." Hannah nodded, but her attention drifted back to her screen. I leaned forward, trying to catch her gaze. "You okay? You seem off." She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, her smile tight. "Just tired. School's been intense." She paused, then added, "Oh, and I heard something weird about Nathan the other day." My stomach did a little flip, but I kept my voice steady. "What kind of weird?" She shrugged, sipping her latte. "Just some gossip. Someone said he was like too good to be true. Maybe he's got a past." Her tone was casual, but her eyes darted to mine, watching for a reaction. I laughed, though it came out sharper than I meant. "Nathan, come on, Hannah. You know him. He's the guy who brings me coffee when I'm stuck at work late." "Yeah, I guess," she said. But there was a smirk, faint but there, like she knew something I didn't. I felt a prickle of unease, like a cold draft in a warm room. I wanted to press her, but the coffee shop was buzzing and a barista called out an order, breaking the moment. I changed the subject, pulling out a photo of the venue. "Look at this place. Nathan and I toured it last weekend. It's perfect." Hannah barely glanced at it, her thumbs scrolling through her phone again. I swallowed my frustration, reminding myself she was young, maybe stressed. I'd been paying her tuition, covering her rent, even sending extra for textbooks. She didn't know it was me, not really. I told her it was a scholarship, a family fund, anything to keep her from feeling indebted. It was my way of keeping us close, of honoring the promise I made to Dad when he passed to always look after her. "So will you be my bridesmaid?" I asked, my voice softer, hoping to pull her back to me. She looked up, her expression unreadable. "Yeah, sure. That'd be cool." But there was no warmth, no excitement, just a quick nod before she stood. "I gotta run. Class soon." I watched her go, her backpack slung over one shoulder, and that prickle in my chest grew sharper. Back at home, I found Nathan in the kitchen chopping vegetables for dinner. His sleeves were rolled up and the radio played softly some old jazz tune. Normally I'd wrap my arms around him, but tonight I hesitated. "Hey," I said, setting my binder on the counter. "Everything okay?" He turned, his brow furrowing. "Yeah, why?" I bit my lip, Hannah's words echoing. "Just, you seem quiet. Did something happen today?" He set the knife down, wiping his hands on a towel. "Got a weird text earlier. Nothing big, just some random number. Probably a scam." His voice was calm, but his eyes didn't meet mine, and that wasn't like him. "What kind of text?" I pressed, my heart picking up speed. He shrugged, turning back to the cutting board. "Just nonsense. Don't worry about it." But I was worried. I stood there watching the back of his head, the way his shoulders tensed. Hannah's smirk flashed in my mind, and I wondered if I was missing something, if the sister I'd spent years protecting was hiding more than I realized. I stood in the kitchen, the jazz tune on the radio now grating against my nerves. Nathan's dismissal of the text gnawed at me, and I couldn't shake Hannah's words about his past. I grabbed a glass of water, hoping it would steady me, but my hands trembled slightly. "You sure it was just a scam?" I asked, keeping my tone light though my chest felt tight. He turned his eyes, searching mine. "Emily, it's nothing. Probably some idiot with too much time." But there was a flicker in his expression, a hesitation that made my stomach twist. I wanted to believe him, to let the warmth of our shared life wash away the doubt, but Hannah's smirk lingered in my mind like a stain. I set the glass down, the clink against the counter louder than I intended. "Okay," I said, forcing a smile. "Just checking." That night I couldn't sleep. The apartment was quiet, save for Nathan's steady breathing beside me. I stared at the ceiling, tracing the familiar cracks in the plaster, my thoughts spiraling. Hannah had always been impulsive, quick to tease or push boundaries, but this felt different. Her comment about Nathan wasn't just gossip. It was deliberate, like she wanted me to doubt him. I rolled over, pulling the blanket tighter, and tried to remember the last time she'd been truly open with me. It had been months, maybe longer. The next morning I headed to work the marketing firm where I'd clawed my way to a decent position. The office was a blur of ringing phones and clicking keyboards, but I felt detached, like I was watching it all through glass. I was sorting through emails when my phone buzzed with a text from Hannah. "Dinner at Mom's tonight. Diane's cooking." I frowned, caught off guard. Diane, our stepmother, rarely invited me over unless there was an agenda. She'd always favored Hannah, showering her with praise while I got lectures about responsibility. Still, I typed back, "Sure, 7 work." When I arrived at the family home, a modest split level on the edge of town, the air smelled of roasted chicken and tension. Diane greeted me at the door, her smile as stiff as her perfectly curled hair. "Emily, you made it," she said, her voice dripping with something I couldn't name. Hannah was already at the table, scrolling through her phone again, her plate untouched. I slid into a chair, the wooden seat creaking under me, and tried to ignore the unease creeping up my spine. Dinner was a minefield. Diane launched into a story about Hannah's latest art project, gushing over her talent while I nodded politely, my fork pushing mashed potatoes around my plate. Then, out of nowhere, Hannah looked up, her eyes glinting. "So, Emily, how's Nathan holding up? Must be stressful planning a wedding with all those rumors floating around." My fork froze midair. "What rumors?" I asked, my voice sharper than I meant. She leaned back, twirling a strand of hair. "Oh, you know, just stuff people say. Like maybe he's not as perfect as you think." Diane chimed in, her tone syrupy. "Hannah's just looking out for you, dear. Men can be complicated." I felt heat rise in my cheeks, my pulse pounding. "If you've got something to say, Hannah, just say it." She shrugged, that same smirk curling her lips. "I'm just saying, maybe you should ask him about his old flames. Could save you some heartache." I gripped the edge of the table, my knuckles whitening. Diane's gaze darted between us, but she didn't intervene, her silence louder than words. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, but the room felt too small, the air too thick. Instead, I stood my chair, scraping against the floor. "I need some air," I muttered, heading for the door. Outside, the night was cool, the streetlights casting long shadows across the lawn. I leaned against my car, my breath uneven, and dug through my purse for my keys. That's when I found it, a folded note slipped in among my things. I unfolded it, my hands shaking. In sharp, unfamiliar handwriting, it read, "Check his phone." No signature, no explanation. I stared at it, my heart sinking, the words burning into me like a brand. I clutched the note in my hand, the words, "Check his phone," pulsing in my head as I drove home from Diane's. The streetlights blurred past, and my chest felt like it was caving in. I wanted to believe it was a prank, some cruel joke, but Hannah's smirk at dinner and Nathan's evasiveness about that text kept colliding in my mind. By the time I pulled into my apartment complex, my knuckles were white from gripping the steering wheel. I sat in the car for a moment, the engine ticking as it cooled, trying to steady my breathing. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was unraveling, something I'd worked so hard to hold together. Inside, Nathan was on the couch, scrolling through his laptop, a baseball game humming in the background. The normalcy of it stung like it was mocking the storm inside me. I slipped off my shoes, the note burning a hole in my purse. "How was dinner?" he asked, glancing up with a half smile. "Fine." I lied, my voice tighter than I meant. I crossed to the kitchen, pouring myself a glass of wine to buy time. My hands shook as I set the bottle down, and I wondered if I should just ask him outright. But the thought of his reaction of him shutting down again made my stomach lurch. Instead, I sat beside him, forcing myself to act normal. "Anything new with you?" He shrugged, eyes back on his screen. "Just work stuff. Long day." His tone was casual, but there was an edge like he was holding something back. I studied his profile, the familiar curve of his jaw, searching for a sign I'd missed. Had I been blind? Hannah's words about his old flames echoed, and I hated how they were burrowing into me. The next morning, I dragged myself to the marketing firm, my eyes gritty from a sleepless night. The office was a hive of activity, but I felt like I was moving through fog. I was updating a client presentation when I caught two coworkers, Sarah and Jenna, whispering by the coffee machine. Their voices dropped when they saw me, but I heard Nathan's name sharp and clear. My pulse spiked, and I stood chair scraping against the floor. "What's that about Nathan?" I asked louder than I intended. Sarah's eyes widened and she fumbled with her mug. "Oh, nothing, Emily. Just heard some gossip, that's all." "What kind?" I pressed, stepping closer. The room seemed to shrink, the hum of keyboards fading. Jenna glanced at Sarah, then back at me. "Just something about him and some woman. Probably nothing." She waved it off, but her smile was nervous and it lit a fuse in me. "Probably nothing," I snapped. "That's my fiancé you're talking about." My voice shook, and I felt heads turn from nearby cubicles. Sarah mumbled an apology and they scurried off, but the damage was done. I sank back into my chair, my face hot, my mind racing. Gossip at work. This wasn't just Hannah's doing anymore. It was spreading, infecting everything. I tried to focus on my work, but my inbox was a blur. I kept seeing that note, those words in stark black ink. "Check his phone." I'd never been the type to snoop, but the idea was taking root, twisting my insides. I rubbed my temples, willing myself to stay calm when my phone buzzed. It was a text from Rachel, my coworker and closest friend at the firm. "Lunch got something to tell you." We met at a deli across the street, the kind with sticky tables and the smell of pastrami in the air. Rachel slid into the booth across from me, her dark curls bouncing as she leaned in. "Okay, don't freak out," she said, her voice low. "But I saw Hannah at the office yesterday." My fork stopped halfway to my mouth. "Hannah, what was she doing here?" Rachel hesitated, picking at her sandwich. "She was talking to your boss, Mark. Looked pretty cozy. I couldn't hear much, but she mentioned your name and it didn't sound friendly." I set my fork down, my appetite gone. "What do you mean, not friendly?" She was like implying you're distracted, not pulling your weight. Mark was nodding, all serious. "I don't know, Emily, it felt off." Rachel's eyes were wide with concern, but her words hit like a punch. Hannah at my job, talking to my boss. The sister I'd been bankrolling, whose tuition I paid, whose rent I covered, was undermining me at work. I leaned back, my breath shallow. Why would she do that? I asked, more to myself than Rachel. But even as I said it, I saw Hannah's smirk again, her careless shrug at dinner. The pieces were starting to fit, and they were ugly. I felt a surge of anger, hot and sharp, but beneath it was something heavier, hurt. I'd given her everything and she was turning it against me. "Thanks for telling me." I managed, my voice barely steady. Rachel reached across the table, squeezing my hand, but I barely felt it. My mind was elsewhere, replaying every moment with Hannah, every sacrifice I'd made. The lunch hour ended, but I couldn't face the office. I texted my boss I wasn't feeling well and left my heart pounding as I headed home, the weight of betrayal settling deeper with every step. I clutched the note in my hand, the words, "Check his phone," pulsing in my head as I drove home from Diane's. The streetlights blurred past, and my chest felt like it was caving in. I wanted to believe it was a prank, some cruel joke, but Hannah's smirk at dinner, and Nathan's evasiveness about that text kept colliding in my mind. By the time I pulled into my apartment complex, my knuckles were white from gripping the steering wheel. I sat in the car for a moment, the engine ticking as it cooled, trying to steady my breathing. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was unraveling, something I'd worked so hard to hold together. Inside, Nathan was on the couch scrolling through his laptop, a baseball game humming in the background. The normalcy of it stung like it was mocking the storm inside me. I slipped off my shoes, the note burning a hole in my purse. "How was dinner?" he asked, glancing up with a half smile. "Fine." I lied, my voice tighter than I meant. I crossed to the kitchen, pouring myself a glass of wine to buy time. My hands shook as I set the bottle down, and I wondered if I should just ask him outright. But the thought of his reaction, of him shutting down again, made my stomach lurch. Instead, I sat beside him, forcing myself to act normal. "Anything new with you?" He shrugged, eyes back on his screen. "Just work stuff. Long day." His tone was casual, but there was an edge, like he was holding something back. I studied his profile, the familiar curve of his jaw, searching for a sign I'd missed. Had I been blind? Hannah's words about his old flames echoed, and I hated how they were burrowing into me. The next morning, I dragged myself to the marketing firm, my eyes gritty from a sleepless night. The office was a hive of activity, but I felt like I was moving through fog. I was updating a client presentation when I caught two coworkers, Sarah and Jenna, whispering by the coffee machine. Their voices dropped when they saw me, but I heard Nathan's name sharp and clear. My pulse spiked, and I stood chair scraping against the floor. "What's that about Nathan?" I asked louder than I intended. Sarah's eyes widened and she fumbled with her mug. "Oh, nothing, Emily. Just heard some gossip, that's all." "What kind?" I pressed, stepping closer. The room seemed to shrink, the hum of keyboards fading. Jenna glanced at Sarah, then back at me. "Just something about him and some woman. Probably nothing." She waved it off, but her smile was nervous, and it lit a fuse in me. "Probably nothing," I snapped. "That's my fiancé you're talking about." My voice shook, and I felt heads turn from nearby cubicles. Sarah mumbled an apology and they scurried off, but the damage was done. I sank back into my chair, my face hot, my mind racing. Gossip at work. This wasn't just Hannah's doing anymore. It was spreading, infecting everything. I tried to focus on my work, but my inbox was a blur. I kept seeing that note, those words in stark black ink. Check his phone. I'd never been the type to snoop, but the idea was taking root, twisting my insides. I rubbed my temples, willing myself to stay calm when my phone buzzed. It was a text from Rachel, my coworker and closest friend at the firm. "Lunch, got something to tell you." We met at a deli across the street, the kind with sticky tables and the smell of pastrami in the air. Rachel slid into the booth across from me, her dark curls bouncing as she leaned in. "Okay, don't freak out," she said, her voice low. "But I saw Hannah at the office yesterday." My fork stopped halfway to my mouth. "Hannah, what was she doing here?" Rachel hesitated, picking at her sandwich. "She was talking to your boss, Mark. Looked pretty cozy. I couldn't hear much, but she mentioned your name and it didn't sound friendly." I set my fork down, my appetite gone. "What do you mean, not friendly?" She was like implying you're distracted, not pulling your weight. Mark was nodding, all serious. "I don't know, Emily, it felt off." Rachel's eyes were wide with concern, but her words hit like a punch. Hannah at my job talking to my boss. The sister I'd been bankrolling, whose tuition I paid, whose rent I covered, was undermining me at work. I leaned back, my breath shallow. Why would she do that? I asked, more to myself than Rachel. But even as I said it, I saw Hannah's smirk again, her careless shrug at dinner. The pieces were starting to fit, and they were ugly. I felt a surge of anger, hot and sharp, but beneath it was something heavier, hurt. I'd given her everything, and she was turning it against me. "Thanks for telling me." I managed, my voice barely steady. Rachel reached across the table, squeezing my hand, but I barely felt it. My mind was elsewhere, replaying every moment with Hannah, every sacrifice I'd made. The lunch hour ended, but I couldn't face the office. I texted my boss I wasn't feeling well and left my heart pounding as I headed home, the weight of betrayal settling deeper with every step. The air at the wedding venue was crisp, the garden glowing under strings of fairy lights we'd chosen months ago. I walked the gravel path, my boots crunching, clutching a folder of final vendor contracts. This place was supposed to be my beginning where Nathan and I would promise forever. But now, with that anonymous email about Jessica and the photo of him with another woman, every step felt like wading through quicksand. My phone buzzed in my pocket and I froze, dread pooling in my gut. It was Nathan. "We need to talk. Now. At the venue." I found him by the arch, where we'd planned to say our vows, his face pale, his hands stuffed deep in his jacket. He didn't look at me, just stared at the ground, and that silence was worse than any words. "Emily," he finally said, his voice low, "I got something else today. You need to see it." He handed me his phone and my hands trembled as I took it. On the screen was a document, a pregnancy report dated last month. It listed Nathan as the father, the mother's name, blank. My breath caught the world tilting. "What is this?" I whispered, my voice barely holding. "I don't know," he said, his eyes meeting mine, desperate. It came in an email, same anonymous account as the photo. "Emily, I swear this isn't real. I haven't been with anyone else." I stared at the report, the clinical black text blurring as my eyes burned. The date, the medical letterhead, it looked so official, so damning. My mind raced, trying to piece it together. Jessica. The photo. Now this. Then why is this happening? I asked, my voice rising. Why is someone doing this to us? Nathan stepped closer, reaching for me, but I backed away, the folder slipping from my hands, papers scattering on the grass. "I can't do this," he said, his voice breaking. "If you don't trust me, if you think I could do this, then what are we even doing?" I felt like I'd been slapped. "You're saying this is my fault?" I snapped, my chest heaving. "You're the one getting these emails, Nathan, and you expect me to just ignore it." "I'm telling you it's a lie," he shouted, his hands balling into fists. "But you're looking at me like I'm a stranger. I can't marry someone who doesn't believe in me." The words hit like a freight train. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. He turned, walking away, his footsteps fading into the dusk. I stood there alone under the fairy lights, the garden's beauty mocking me. My knees buckled and I sank to the ground, the cold seeping through my jeans. The pregnancy report was still on his phone, glowing in my hand, and I couldn't look away. It was tearing us apart, and I didn't know how to stop it. I don't know how long I sat there, the night closing in, but my phone buzzed again, pulling me back. It was a text from Hannah. "Heard you're at the venue. Everything okay?" The casualness of it, the timing, sent a chill down my spine. She knew I was here. How I typed back, my fingers shaking. "Meet me at my place. We need to talk." I needed answers, and I needed them now. When I got home, the apartment was dark. Nathan's jacket gone from the hook by the door. I flipped on the light, my heart pounding, and waited. Hannah arrived 20 minutes later, her hair pulled back, her expression all fake concern. "What's going on, Em?" she asked, dropping her bag on the floor. I didn't sit, didn't offer her a drink. I stood by the counter, the phone with the pregnancy report in my hand. "Did you send this?" I asked, holding it up, my voice steady, despite the storm inside me. Her eyes widened, but only for a second. Then she laughed, a sharp, brittle sound. "What, you think I'd do that? Come on, Emily. I'm your sister." "Don't lie to me," I said, stepping closer, my voice low. "You've been dropping hints, stirring up rumors. Did you send this to Nathan?" She crossed her arms, her lips curling into that familiar smirk. "You're paranoid. But maybe I was just trying to protect you. Nathan's not who you think he is." Her words were a spark to gasoline. I felt something crack inside me, a flood of anger and hurt I couldn't hold back. "Protect me," I shouted. "You call this protection? You're ruining my life." Hannah didn't flinch, just tilted her head like she was studying me. "Maybe you needed a wake-up call," she said, her voice cold. You're always so perfect, Emily, always in control. But you don't see what's right in front of you. I stared at her, my sister, the person I'd sacrificed so much for, and felt the ground shift beneath me. She wasn't denying it. She was standing there admitting she'd done this, and the truth was worse than I'd imagined. The room felt too small, the air too thick, as Hannah's words hung between us. Her smirk was gone, replaced by a cold, unyielding stare that made my skin crawl. I gripped the counter, my nails digging into the wood, trying to anchor myself against the rage and hurt crashing through me. "Why?" I asked, my voice raw, barely holding together. "Why would you do this to me?" Hannah leaned back against the wall, her arms still crossed like we were just having a casual chat. "You think you're the only one who's had it hard, Emily?" she said, her tone sharp, slicing. "You got the perfect job, the perfect fiancé, the perfect life. And me? I'm just your charity case scraping by on your handouts." My breath caught a sharp pain in my chest. "Handouts," I repeated, my voice trembling. "I've paid for your college, your rent, everything, Hannah. I did it because I love you, because I promised Dad I'd take care of you." Her eyes narrowed and she stepped forward, her voice dropping to a hiss. "Don't throw that in my face. You think I don't know, you're the one paying, you think I'm stupid. I found the bank statements in Diane's desk months ago. You've been playing the saint, but it's control, Emily. You want me to owe you forever." I staggered back like she'd slapped me. The room spun, her words twisting everything I'd believed about us. "That's not true," I whispered, but my voice cracked, doubt creeping in. Had I been controlling? Had I made her feel small? No, I thought, shaking my head. This was her twisting it, turning my love into a weapon. Before I could respond, the door swung open and Diane walked in, her purse slung over her shoulder, her face a mask of disapproval. "What's all this yelling?" she demanded, her gaze flicking from me to Hannah. Hannah didn't miss a beat. "Emily's freaking out, Mom," she said, her voice suddenly soft, almost pitiful. "She thinks I sent some fake document to Nathan. She's losing it." Diane's eyes locked on me, her lips pursing. "Emily, this is ridiculous. You're attacking your sister over nothing after everything she's been through." "Nothing," I shouted, my voice breaking free, raw and jagged. "She sent a fake pregnancy report to Nathan Diane. She's been spreading lies, trying to ruin my wedding." I held up the phone, the screen still glowing with that damning document, my hands shaking so hard I nearly dropped it. Diane barely glanced at it. "You're being dramatic," she said, her tone icy. "Hannah was worried about you. She told me Nathan's been hiding things and I helped her dig a little. We were trying to save you from a mistake." The floor dropped out from under me. Diane, too. My stepmother, who'd never hidden her preference for Hannah, had been part of this. I looked between them, mother and daughter, standing together like a united front, and felt a sickening clarity. This wasn't just Hannah's jealousy. It was a calculated betrayal planned and executed with Diane's blessing. "You helped her," I said, my voice barely audible, each word heavy with disbelief. "You both did this to me." Hannah shrugged, her expression unreadable now, but Diane stepped closer, her voice low and venomous. "You've always thought you're better than us, Emily. The responsible one, the one who saved Hannah. But you don't get to play hero and expect us to bow. Nathan's no good for you, and deep down you know it." I couldn't breathe. The room was closing in, their words piling on like stones, crushing me. I thought of Nathan walking away at the venue, his face full of hurt, and now this, my family, the people I'd poured my heart into, standing here tearing it apart. I wanted to scream, to throw something, but my body wouldn't move. I was drowning in their truth, their lies, their utter disregard for me. Diane turned to Hannah, her hand on her shoulder. "Let's go, sweetheart. She needs to calm down." Hannah grabbed her bag, not even looking at me, and they walked out the door, clicking shut behind them. I stood there alone, the silence deafening, my heart shattered into pieces I didn't know how to pick up. The silence in my apartment was suffocating after Hannah and Diane left their betrayal hanging in the air like smoke. I stood frozen by the counter, the phone with that fake pregnancy report still in my hand, its weight heavier than ever. My eyes burned, but no tears came. I was too hollowed out for that. The life I'd built, my wedding, my family, my trust was crumbling, and I'd been too busy holding it together to see the cracks. But something shifted in that moment, a spark of clarity through the fog. I couldn't let them destroy me. Not anymore. I set the phone down and grabbed my laptop, my hands moving before my mind caught up. I needed answers not just about Hannah's lies, but about everything I'd been carrying for her. I logged into my bank account, scrolling through years of transfers, tuition payments, labeled scholarship rent checks for her apartment, utility bills for Diane's house. Thousands of dollars, month after month, all funneled through accounts I'd set up to keep it anonymous. I'd told myself it was for love for Dad's memory, but now it felt like chains. I needed to understand the full scope, so I called Greg, my lawyer, a gruff man who'd helped me sort out Dad's estate years ago. His office was in a nondescript building downtown, and I drove there the next morning, the city a blur of gray and glass. Greg's desk was cluttered with files, but his eyes were sharp as he leaned back in his chair. "What's going on, Emily?" he asked, folding his hands. I took a deep breath, my voice steady despite the ache in my chest. "I need you to look at my finances. Everything I've been paying for Hannah and Diane. I want to know exactly where it's gone." He raised an eyebrow but didn't push. I handed him a folder of bank statements, my fingers brushing the paper I'd spent years hiding. "I've been covering Hannah's college, her rent, even Diane's bills," I said. "They don't know it's me. Or well, Hannah figured it out somehow. But I need to see it all laid out." Greg flipped through the pages, his pen tapping the desk. "This is a lot, Emily. You've been bankrolling their lives. Why keep it secret?" I looked out the window, the skyline jagged against the morning light. I wanted Hannah to feel free, not indebted. After Dad died, I promised I'd take care of her. But now, my voice caught and I swallowed hard. She used it against me. She faked a pregnancy report to ruin my wedding. Diane helped her. I can't keep doing this. Greg nodded, his expression softening. "All right. I'll pull the records, trace every payment. But if you're thinking of stopping, you need to be ready for pushback. Diane might try to spin this legally claim you owe her. Let her try." I said, my voice firmer than I expected. The words felt like a release, like I was finally claiming something back. I left his office with a plan, forming a quiet resolve taking root. I wasn't just going to sit here and bleed for them anymore. Back in my car, I stared at my phone, my thumb hovering over an email draft I'd started last night. It was to Nathan, a letter I hadn't sent yet, words I'd poured out in the dark. I wrote about the report, about Hannah's betrayal, about how I'd been too scared to trust him, but was trying to find my way back. I didn't know if he'd read it, if he'd care, but I needed him to know I wasn't giving up on us. Not yet. I hit save, not ready to send it, but the act of writing it made me feel stronger, like I was taking a step towards something real. I drove to a small bookstore I loved, needing a moment to breathe. The shelves were crammed with paperbacks, the air thick with the smell of ink and dust. I wandered to the self-help section, my fingers trailing over spines about healing and boundaries. A book caught my eye, its title simple, Letting Go Without Losing Yourself. I bought it, tucking it under my arm like a shield. As I stepped back into the sunlight, I felt a flicker of power, a sense that I was finally starting to fight for me. I clutched this bookstore bag, the weight of the self-help book grounding me as I drove across town, the afternoon sun glinting off the windshield. My mind was still spinning from Greg's warning about Diane's potential pushback, but I felt a new clarity, sharp and unyielding. For years I'd let love blind me, pouring myself into Hannah's life, into Diane's house, thinking it was duty. Now I saw it for what it was, a one-way street paved with my own sacrifice. It was time to change the map. I pulled into the parking lot of Hannah's college, a sprawling campus with brick buildings and students milling about, their laughter. A stark contrast to the fire in my chest. I'd never confronted her like this, never stepped into her world with my own agenda. But today was different. I found her outside the arts building, leaning against a tree, sketching in a notebook. Her hair was loose, her posture relaxed, like she hadn't just shattered my life. I stopped a few feet away, my heart pounding but my voice steady. Hannah, we need to talk. She looked up, her pencil pausing, and for a moment I saw a flicker of unease in her eyes. What's up, Em? She said, closing her notebook. Her tone too casual, like she was humoring me. I didn't soften my stance. I know you sent that pregnancy report to Nathan. I said, each word deliberate. I know you've been spreading lies, talking to my boss, trying to tear me down. What I don't know is why. But I'm done guessing. You need to tell Nathan the truth. Today. Her lips parted, then curled into a scoff. Wow, you're really going all in, huh? You think you can just show up here and make demands? I told you I was protecting you. Her voice was sharp, but her eyes darted to the students passing by, aware of the attention we were drawing. Protecting me, I said, stepping closer, my voice low but firm. You call ruining my wedding protection. You used my money, my trust, and turned it against me. I've been paying for your life, Hannah. Your tuition, your apartment, everything. And you repay me with this. Her face hardened, and she stood brushing leaves off her jeans. Oh, please. You love playing the martyr. You think I asked for your charity. You're the one who decided to control me, to make me your little project. I don't owe you anything. The words stung, but I didn't flinch. I'd heard them before at my apartment, but now they fueled me instead of breaking me. You're wrong, I said, my voice steady. I didn't do it to control you. I did it because I loved you. But I'm done carrying you while you stab me in the back. Confess to Nathan, or I'm done with you for good. Hannah laughed, a brittle sound that echoed in the open air. You're pathetic, Emily. Go ahead, cut me off. I'll figure it out. I always do. She grabbed her bag and walked away, her steps quick, leaving me standing there, the campus buzzing around me. I felt eyes on me, students whispering, but I didn't care. For the first time, I'd said what I needed to say, and it felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. Back at home, I sat at my desk, the apartment quiet, except for the hum of the fridge. I opened my laptop, pulling up the email to Nathan I'd saved earlier. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, then started typing, adding new lines. I told him about Hannah's refusal to confess, about the money I'd spent on her, about how I was choosing to fight for myself now. I didn't beg him to come back. I just laid out the truth, raw and unfiltered. When I hit send, my heart raced, but there was a calm beneath it, a certainty I hadn't felt in weeks. I leaned back in my chair, the book from the bookstore on the desk beside me. I opened it, skimming the first page, and a line caught my eye. You can't change others, but you can change what you carry. I closed the book, my fingers resting on the cover, and looked out the window at the fading light. The world was still broken, but I wasn't. Not anymore. I stood my shadow steady against the wall and knew I was ready for whatever came next. The rest of my workday blurred into a haze of emails and forced smiles, but Rachel's warning about Hannah's lies clung to me like damp clothes. I left the office early, needing somewhere to think, and ended up at a diner a few blocks away, its neon sign flickering in the late afternoon light. The place was half empty, the air thick with grease and coffee. I slid into a booth, the vinyl seat creaking, and ordered a tea, letting the warmth of the mug seep into my hands. Rachel joined me, her shift over her presence a quiet anchor. You sure you're okay? She asked, stirring sugar into her coffee, her eyes scanning my face. You've been different since all this started. I traced the rim of my mug, the steam curling upward. I don't know what okay looks like anymore, I said, my voice low, measured. Hannah's not just coming for my wedding. She's trying to take my job, my reputation. And Diane's backing her up like always. Rachel's jaw tightened, but before she could respond, she leaned forward, her voice dropping. I didn't want to pile on earlier, but there's more. I overheard Mark talking to HR. They're reviewing your performance, Emily. Someone's been feeding them stories about missed deadlines, client complaints. It's got Hannah's fingerprints all over it. I froze the mug halfway to my lips. My job, the one I'd poured years into, the one that paid for Hannah's life, was slipping out from under me. I set the mug down, the clink loud in the quiet diner. She's not stopping, I said, more to myself than Rachel. She's burning everything down. Rachel reached for my hand, but I pulled back, not ready for comfort. I stared out the window, the street outside smeared with rain that had started to fall. I thought of Hannah's voicemail, her voice dripping with entitlement, and Diane's threat to expose me. They weren't just fighting back. They were trying to dismantle me piece by piece. "Thanks for the heads up," I said, my voice calm but my mind churning. Rachel nodded, squeezing my arm before heading back to her desk. I sat alone in the break room, the fluorescent lights humming overhead. The anger was there, hot and familiar, but beneath it was something new, a cold, clear resolve. I'd given them everything, my money, my trust, my silence, and they'd used it to build a cage around me. But I wasn't trapped anymore. I opened my phone, pulling up Greg's contact. "Any updates on the financial records?" I texted. His reply came fast. "Working on it. Found some irregularities. Call me later." Irregularities. The word lingered, a spark of possibility, but I didn't let myself hope yet. Back at my desk, I tried to focus, but Diane's voicemail played on a loop in my head. "Make sure everyone knows." I pictured her in our hometown, spinning stories at the grocery store, the church, anywhere she could find an audience. And Hannah, with her charm and her tears, playing the victim. The thought made my chest tighten, not with fear, but with a strange, hollow sadness. They didn't know me, not really. They never had. I woke to the sound of my phone buzzing on the nightstand, the screen glowing in the pre-dawn dark. It was a voicemail from Hannah, left at 3 a.m. I hesitated, my thumb hovering, then played it. Her voice was sharp-edged with panic. "Emily, what did you do? My landlord's kicking me out. The college dropped me for unpaid tuition. You can't just do this." The message cut off abrupt, like she'd hung up mid-thought. I sat up, the blankets pooling around me, and stared at the phone. No apology, no regret, just anger, as if I'd betrayed her. I didn't call back. Instead, I got dressed, the weight of her words settling into me, heavy but not crushing. I'd stopped the payments, her rent, her tuition, Diane's utilities, after confronting her at the college. It was my line in the sand, drawn with a hand that no longer shook. But hearing her voice, the raw edge of her desperation stirred something in me. Not guilt, not exactly, but a kind of ache, like pressing a bruise to see if it still hurts. At the kitchen table, I sipped coffee, the steam curling in the morning chill. My laptop was open, the email to Nathan still marked as unread in his inbox. I didn't check it again. I'd said what I needed to say. The book from the bookstore sat beside me, its pages dog-eared from late-night reading. I'd underlined a sentence about releasing what no longer serves you, and it felt like a quiet command, one I was finally learning to follow. My phone buzzed again, this time a voicemail from Diane. I braced myself and played it. "Emily, this is unacceptable," she said, her voice tight, controlled, like she was reading a script. "You've cut off the power, the water, everything. Hannah's in tears, and you're acting like a child. Fix this, or I'll make sure everyone knows what you've done." The message ended, and I set the phone down, my hands steady, but my heart racing. Everyone. What did that mean? Our neighbors, my coworkers. The threat was vague but sharp, a reminder of Diane's knack for twisting narratives. I drove to work, the city waking up around me, horns blaring and lights flickering on. The marketing firm was quieter than usual, the usual buzz dampened by a Monday morning slump. I was updating a client deck when Rachel caught me in the break room, her eyes wide with that familiar mix of concern and gossip. "Emily, you okay?" she asked, pouring coffee into a chipped mug. "I heard something weird about you." My stomach tightened, but I kept my face neutral. "What now?" She glanced around, lowering her voice. "Someone's been talking to the team, saying you're unreliable, that you've been distracted messing up projects. I think it's Hannah. I saw her name pop up in an email chain with Mark." I gripped my mug, the heat searing my palms. Hannah again at my job. First she'd whispered to my boss, and now this spreading lies to my colleagues. I thought of her voicemail, her voice dripping with entitlement, and Diane's threat to expose me. They weren't just fighting back. They were trying to dismantle me piece by piece. "Thanks for the heads up," I said, my voice calm but my mind churning. Rachel nodded, squeezing my arm before heading back to her desk. I sat alone in the break room, the fluorescent lights humming overhead. The anger was there, hot and familiar, but beneath it was something new, a cold, clear resolve. I'd given them everything: my money, my trust, my silence, and they'd used it to build a cage around me. But I wasn't trapped anymore. I opened my phone, pulling up Greg's contact. "Any updates on the financial records?" I texted. His reply came fast. "Working on it. Found some irregularities. Call me later." Irregularities. The word lingered, a spark of possibility, but I didn't let myself hope yet. Back at my desk, I tried to focus, but Diane's voicemail played on a loop in my head. Make sure everyone knows. I pictured her in our hometown spinning stories at the grocery store, the church, anywhere she could find an audience. And Hannah with her charm and her tears playing the victim. The thought made my chest tighten, not with fear, but with a strange, hollow sadness. They didn't know me, not really. They never had. The morning sun filtered through the trees in the park, casting dappled shadows on the grass. I sat on a bench, a thermos of coffee warming my hands, the air crisp with the promise of fall. It had been a week since Mark's voicemail about my performance. A week since I'd learned Hannah was skimming my money. The world hadn't stopped spinning, but I'd found a quiet corner of it here where I could breathe. I'd come to this park to meet Nathan, my first real step toward mending what was left of us. He arrived a few minutes later, his coat unbuttoned, his face softer than I'd seen in weeks. He sat beside me, leaving a careful space between us, and for a moment we just watched a squirrel dart across the path. "I read your email," he said finally, his voice low, deliberate. "I'm sorry, Emily. I let that fake report get in my head. I should have trusted you." I sipped my coffee, letting his words settle. They didn't erase the hurt, but they softened its edges like water smoothing a stone. "I didn't trust you either," I said. Meeting his eyes. "I let Hannah's lies twist everything. But I'm trying to be better for me, not just for us." My voice was steady, not pleading, and it felt like a truth I'd earned. Nathan nodded, his hands clasped in his lap. "I want to fix this," he said. "But I know it's not that simple. Can we take it slow?" I looked at the trees, their leaves just starting to turn, and felt a calm I hadn't known in months. "Yeah," I said. "Slow's good." It wasn't a promise, not yet, but it was a start, and that was enough for now. He stood, offering a small smile, and walked away, his figure blending into the morning light. I stayed on the bench, the thermos cool now, and felt a weight lift, not gone, but lighter. Later that day, I moved into my new apartment, a small one-bedroom with bare walls and creaky floors. The movers had left my boxes in a haphazard pile, and I stood in the middle of it, hands on my hips, taking it in. This was mine, a space I'd chosen without Hannah's needs or Diane's demands shaping it. I unpacked a single box, pulling out a framed photo of me and Dad taken at a county fair when I was 10. His arm was around me, his grin wide, and I smiled back at it, a quiet ache in my chest. Rachel showed up that evening carrying a pizza and a bottle of wine. "Housewarming gift," she said, kicking off her shoes. We sat on the floor, the pizza box open between us, and she told me about her own family, a story I'd never heard. Her brother had borrowed money for years, promising to pay it back only to vanish when she needed him. "It's not the money," she said, swirling her wine. "It's the trust. Once it's gone, you see people differently." I nodded, picking at a slice of pepperoni. "I used to think I could fix Hannah," I said. "That if I gave enough, she'd love me the way I loved her. But I can't make her be someone she's not." My voice was soft, but there was no bitterness, just a clarity that had taken root somewhere along the way. Rachel raised her glass. "To new beginnings," she said, and I clinked mine against hers, the sound bright in the empty room. We talked late into the night, the conversation weaving through her stories and mine, and I felt a connection I hadn't realized I'd been missing. This wasn't family, not the way I'd known it, but it was something real, something I could build on. When Rachel left, I stood at my window looking out at the street below, the lights of passing cars flickering like stars. I thought of Dad, of the way he'd always believed in me even when I doubted myself. I wasn't there yet, not fully, but I was closer than I'd ever been. I turned back to the room, the boxes waiting, and felt a quiet resolve to make this place my own. I woke early the next morning, the new apartment still unfamiliar, its corners sharp with possibility. Sunlight spilled through the bare windows, and I sat cross-legged on the floor, a notebook open in my lap. I'd started jotting down ideas not for work or weddings, but for me things I wanted to try, like painting or learning to cook something beyond pasta. It felt small, almost silly, but each word I wrote was a step into a life I was choosing, not inheriting. My phone buzzed on the counter, a text from Hannah. "Can we talk? I'm sorry." I read it twice, my thumb hovering over the reply button. Her words were soft, unlike her usual sharpness, but they didn't pull me in like they once would have. I thought of her standing in the college courtyard dismissing my pain, and of the years I'd spent trying to earn her love. I set the phone down unanswered and felt no anger, just a quiet certainty that some doors needed to stay closed. I spent the day unpacking, hanging a single picture on the wall, a watercolor of a lake bought on impulse from a street artist. It wasn't much, but it was mine, a splash of color against the blankness. As I stepped back to admire it, I thought of the garden I'd planned to plant, inspired by Dad's love of growing things. I didn't have a balcony, but I could start small, maybe a few pots of herbs by the window. The idea felt like a promise, not to him, but to myself. That afternoon, I walked to a nearby hardware store, the kind with narrow aisles and the smell of sawdust. I picked out a terracotta pot, its surface rough under my fingers, and a packet of basil seeds. The cashier, an older man with deep laugh lines, chatted about his own garden, how it kept him grounded. I nodded, smiling, and realized I wasn't just buying a pot. I was building something new, something that didn't depend on anyone else's approval. Back home, I filled this pot with soil, my hands dark with earth, and pressed the seeds into it, careful but not fussy. I set it on the windowsill where the light was strongest and wiped my hands on a towel. It wasn't a grand gesture, but it felt like enough, a quiet act of faith in tomorrow. I stood there watching the soil, knowing it would take time to see green, and that was okay. Time was something I was learning to give myself. Later, I met Rachel for coffee at a small shop down the street, its walls lined with mismatched bookshelves. We sat by a window, the glass fogged with condensation, and she asked about Nathan. "We're talking," I said, stirring my latte, the foam swirling into patterns. "But I'm not rushing it. I need to know who I am without all this noise first." She nodded, her eyes warm. "You're different, you know. Stronger. Not like you're trying to prove something, just you." I smiled, the compliment settling into me like a stone in a riverbed. I thought of the girl I'd been always fixing, always giving, and saw her fading, not gone, but quieter. I wasn't that girl anymore, not entirely. I was someone who could sit here in a coffee shop and feel the world turning without needing to control it. As I walked home, the streets busy with evening traffic, I passed a mailbox, its blue paint chipped but sturdy. I stopped, pulling a folded letter from my bag, one I'd written to myself last night. It wasn't long, just a few lines about what I deserved: peace, honesty, a life I didn't have to earn. I slipped it into the slot, knowing I'd never mail it, but the act felt final, like closing a book I'd read too many times. I kept walking, my steps light, the city humming around me, and let the moment be enough. It's been a year since I stood in that apartment watching Hannah and Diane walk out their betrayal, a weight I thought I'd carry forever. I'm 33 now, sitting in a different coffee shop, one with mismatched chairs and a chalkboard menu. The morning light slants through the window, warming my hands as I cradle a mug of chamomile tea. My new apartment is a few blocks away. No longer bare, but filled with small things I've chosen: a woven rug, a shelf of novels, a basil plant that's somehow still alive. Life isn't perfect, but it's mine, and that's a victory I'm learning to hold close. I've started new habits, quiet ones that anchor me. Most mornings I walk to this shop before work, not for the caffeine, but for the routine, the way the barista, a woman named Lila, nods like she knows me. I bring a journal, not the kind I used to keep full of to-do lists and worries, but one where I write what I'm grateful for. Today's entry is short: the sound of rain last night, a good meeting at work, the way my shoes feel broken in. Small things, but they add up like stones building a path. Work has steadied too. After Mark's review last year, I met with him, laid out my side, and showed the projects I'd carried despite the chaos. He listened, and though Hannah's lies left a shadow, I kept my job, even earned a small promotion. I don't talk about her at the office anymore. Don't let her name slip into conversations. Rachel's still there, a friend who's become more like family, and we've started a lunch club with a few others sharing stories over sandwiches. It's not grand, but it's real, a circle I've built without obligation. Nathan and I are dating again, but it's different now. We meet for dinners or walks, no rush to rebuild what broke. Last week we sat on a pier eating ice cream as the sun set and talked about our fears, not our plans. He's patient, and I'm learning to be too. I don't need him to complete me. I need him to see me, the me I'm becoming. That's enough for now, and I'm okay with not knowing what's next. I've cut contact with Hannah and Diane, a choice that feels less like anger and more like necessity. Hannah sent one more text a few months ago asking to meet, but I didn't respond. I don't hate her. I just don't have room for her anymore. Diane's voice still echoes sometimes her accusations of my selfishness, but it's fainter now, drowned out by the life I'm living. I don't check their social media, don't ask mutual friends for updates. I've let them go, not with a fight, but with a quiet step away. The other day I found a new ritual. After work, I stopped by a community center near my place where I've joined a pottery class. It's messy, my hands caked with clay, but there's something about shaping something from nothing that feels right. My first bowl was lopsided, but I kept it set on my kitchen counter to hold fruit. It's not perfect, but it's mine, and every time I see it, I'm reminded I can create, even after everything. I take a sip of tea. The chamomile soft on my tongue, and watch the shop fill with people, a man reading a newspaper, a couple laughing over muffins. I used to envy lives like theirs, thinking they had it all figured out. Now I know better. Everyone's carrying something, but it's what you do with it that matters. I close my journal, the pages full of days I've lived, not just survived, and feel a stillness settle over me, like the world is pausing just for a moment to let me breathe. I left the coffee shop, my journal tucked under my arm, and walked toward the community center for my pottery class. The streets were alive with evening chatter, but I felt a quiet inside me, steady as a heartbeat. Last night I'd driven to the cemetery where Dad's buried, a place I hadn't visited in years. I sat by his headstone, the granite cool under my fingers, and spoke to him not about Hannah or the pain, but about who I was becoming. I told him about the pottery, the new friends, the way I was learning to laugh without looking over my shoulder. I didn't cry. I just sat there, the stars bright above, and felt him listening. That visit shifted something. I'd spent so long trying to keep his promise to care for Hannah that I'd forgotten he'd also wanted me to live, really live. I started a new routine after that one I hadn't shared with anyone. Every Sunday I write a letter to myself, not to mail, but to keep tucked in a wooden box under my bed. They're short sometimes, just a sentence about what I'm proud of, what I'm letting go. One read, "You don't need to fix everyone to be whole." Another, "Your heart is enough." They're my way of marking the road I'm on, proof I'm moving forward. Rachel and I have grown closer, and we've started something new together, a small group at the community center for women rebuilding after betrayal. We meet weekly, sharing stories over tea and folding chairs. No judgment, just listening. I don't lead it. I'm just there offering what I've learned. One woman, Clara, spoke last week about her ex-husband's lies, her voice breaking but strong. I saw myself in her, the me from a year ago, and realized how far I'd come. I don't have all the answers, but I can sit with her pain, and that's enough. Nathan's still part of my life, but we're careful, like gardeners tending something fragile. We went to a farmer's market recently, picking out apples and joking about my terrible bargaining skills. It wasn't a grand reunion, just a moment, but it felt honest. I'm learning to love without clinging, to trust without losing myself. It's slow, but it's real, and I'm okay with that. The biggest change isn't in what I do, but in how I see myself. I used to think strength was carrying everyone else's weight, being the one who never broke. Now I know it's in the quiet choices, saying no, walking away, choosing my own peace. I've forgiven Hannah, not because she deserves it, but because I deserve to be free. That's the lesson I carry now, the one I wish I'd learned sooner. You can't control how others treat you, but you can decide what you let shape you. I choose what builds me up, what makes me whole. I'm back in my apartment now, the evening's soft around me. I light a candle, its glow warm against the walls, and sit by the window watching the city settle into night. This is my life, not perfect, but mine, and I'm grateful for every piece of it. What's the moment that taught you to choose yourself? Share it in the comments. I'd love to hear your story. If this resonated, please subscribe, and share it with someone who might need it. Thank you for listening, for being here. Here's to healing, to finding your own light wherever you are.